we're in a somewhat different position here of providing funding. But let me go back a little bit 6 years ago, and I think it might be interesting to see kind of where Fledgling has come. I was an academic for many years. I taught, and I came to New York 6 years ago, and I decided that the written word had enormous limitations, that you spend so much time writing and months writing an article, and 11 people read it and 10 disagreed, So I just really didn't feel that the social issues that I was really interested in were getting enough impactful material about them. And although I had developed a course around corporate involvement in social issues, a course called BLISS, Business Leadership in the Social Sector, I still didn't feel that the written word had a lot of possibilities. So at that point, I really didn't know anything about film. I could barely spell it. And a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to go to an editing suite and watch some rough footage. And all those terms might have, they were Greek. I mean, I really never been to an editing suite. I had no idea what rough footage was. But it sounded like, a reasonable idea. So I remember going up in this elevator, which is a real, one of these real New York elevators that probably are against breaking all codes now, up to the 7th floor of an editing suite. And I watched this footage. And I'd been to India probably 12 or 15 times, because I did a lot of work when I was at Harvard in India. And this film was about India, and it just resonated. And I thought, wow, this really gives you an understanding of what really goes on in India better than anything I've ever read. And so we were just figuring out kind of how to start this little organization. So we put some money behind this film. And the film went on to win the Academy Award a year later. It was called Born into Brothels. And so it was just really funny that the first film we ever got involved in won an Academy Award. I still get such a kick out of that. So now, 6 years later, our films have been involved. We just did the calculation last week for a project we were asked to provide data about. We've gotten 6 Emmy Awards and 6 Academy Awards in 6 years, which is pretty amazing. So now we're at the stage of really kind of looking back and saying, we're involved in about 100 projects at this point. We get about 1,000 requests for funding every year in 2 cycles of about 500. And we're in the middle of one right now, so my eyes are kind of glazed. But we hone down the 480 or so down to about 75. And then of the 75, we watch every inch of all those 75 that are sent to us. And then we usually choose 15 or 20. So it's gotten sadly very, very competitive. And on that side, my main goal in the next year is to really get more people to put money in the pot. And so I've gotten 3 family foundations, and a major foundation is also giving us money. So because we think we really know how to choose these filmmakers really well and how to choose the films. And I wish we had more money so we could be a little bit more broader in our funding. So we really thought a lot about it. And let me just give you kind of some general thoughts. And I put together a list for another panel about kind of the 10 key issues around successful outreach. So let me try to go through these really quickly, and then we can go back and I can even make them available to you on our website. The absolute #1 thing in terms of successful community engagement is to have a terrific filmmaker. Because I can't tell you how often filmmakers just are not terribly interested in doing much with their film. At the beginning, we would say, what do you want your film to accomplish? And they would say, go to Sundance, okay? Which is lovely, but it really is not what we had in mind. So the filmmaker has to be ready to stand with the film. The first time I ever met Robert, he showed me their screening tools, their screening in a box. We weren't doing that at the time. So it's really up to the filmmaker. Nobody loves your child the way you do, okay? The second is to have a really compelling, wonderful story. And I can't tell you how often I look at a film and I think, oh God, I wish I liked this film. It's so important. The subject is so important, but I'm so tempted to press the forward button, And it's hard. It's hard to make a film compelling, and you get kind of lost in it. Next is to have a really clear goal about what you think you can accomplish. And it can be more than one goal, but usually not 12 goals. It has to be, I think this film can accomplish the following. And sometimes it's very tough. I just looked at a film this afternoon before I came here that is about 5 or 6 different ideas. And it's going to be very difficult to pull out those strands and find a campaign around those strands that can really address all of those goals. It's still a beautiful film, but I'm just not sure at all how it lends itself to effective community engagement. Then finding your target audiences, and I think Rachel both of you did a really good job talking about that, but really trying to figure out who is really going to be interested in this film, and is it the faith community, and what are they going to do with it? When you're talking about the disabled, is it the disabled themselves? Is it their providers, their caretakers, their parents, the schools? What are the target audiences? And that's really worth the time to explore, because if you don't do that work at the beginning, it's very difficult to recoup it later, as Roger said, which is the first cousin of the next point, which is looking at effective research. There is a concept that we used to teach at Harvard Business School called the value of imperfect information, which basically means that sometimes you just have to act. You can always get more research. It's like trying to find the perfect spouse and saying, you know, I kind of like Robert, but if I wait, maybe there's someone better, you know? And at some point, you just gotta do it. And I work with so many people now that just say, you know, we have 12 people working on research for this film, and there just comes a point where, yes, of course you need to know who your audiences are, of course you need to do research, but you can't get paralyzed by it. And I'm seeing that kind of happen in the field right now, and I feel that it's kind of an intellectual ossification, which I think can be really dangerous. The next point is to connect with partners really effectively. And again, looking at all 3 of you, you all did that, and you did too. But it's such an important point to figure out who the NGOs are in the field. And I'm finding now that if we're presented with a film that doesn't have NGOs that would be interested, it's going to be really difficult to build a campaign, because we have to sit down and figure out who those NGOs are. One of the first films we took on was a film called Very Young Girls about criminalization of sexual activity in New York City. And at that point, we really barely knew what we were doing, but we did have the sense enough to pull together around a table the key partners around the country that were worrying about that issue. And the interesting thing was that they were very helpful to us, but they'd never met each other. And the fact that they were all around a table in our office talking, oh, you're the person from San Francisco, I've seen you in an email, you know, but just making those connections was tremendously useful for them. So connecting with partners is absolutely crucial. Building audiences early on. Now remember that when we started, this whole process has been an incredible moving target. There was no such thing as Twitter. There was really very little emphasis on Facebook, more so on MySpace at the time. Kickstarter wasn't even in embryonic stage. And all of these things have just changed. Nobody had an iPhone. Cell phones were, you know, a totally different concept. So again, it's just incredible to me how quickly this has changed. And I surround myself with really, really young people because I'm so old. And it's just, relatively speaking, I have a daughter who's constantly kind of training me to think about these things differently. Things like we don't print, we don't have a printer, we don't print anything at all, we own no paper. And that is something that the younger people around me has kind of forced me to do, which has been very helpful. The next point, which I think should have been actually earlier, is to understand your vocabulary. There's a very good paper on our website which really talks about the difference between distribution, outreach, and audience engagement. And those are very different terms, and I find that they're used interchangeably, even by filmmakers. And it's just, it's a huge disservice because they are very, very different things. And people say, oh, I know Fledgling, you guys do great distribution. No, we don't do any distribution. We might advise on distribution, but we don't do distribution. And outreach is really getting people to come and see the film. And then audience engagement is really what do people do when they see the film, and how can you entice them to think about the issue differently. Next, and you've done that and said that, is to, except for you, Roger, you failed there, is to build outreach very early into the budget. And now we are seeing filmmakers, because of course we ask for proposals and budgets, we're getting huge outreach budgets built into the original proposal. I'm talking $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 is not atypical now. I mean, enormous. At the beginning, we felt we could do a lot with $30,000 and $40,000, and now there are people that are really going out there and asking for $500,000, which we're not in a position to give. So basically, what we do is, and some of them really, they have very, very good plans, and so we try to be the lead funder. Although I have found, and I hope that you guys would agree, that sometimes that early $10,000 grant is what really can can really move things forward. And I always think that I wish I could give more. And I and we, meaning there are three of us that make all decisions at Fledgling, and all decisions are made as a threesome. But we wish we could give more, but sometimes that early 10,000, and because we can act really, really quickly, we can make a travel discretionary decision in a very short amount of time. So sometimes that early decision can really be very helpful. And then building unique engagement tools. I think what Robert said is absolutely right. You've seen one good film. You've seen one good film. And you've seen one good outreach engagement strategy. The next one is going to be totally different. I mean, for example, No Impact Man, which is a film that we picked up a couple of years ago, and that we're no longer funding them, but we're still very interested. They did something called the No Impact Experiment, which they got people on the web to sign up for their experiment. And at one point, they were doing like 1,000 people a week were signing up to kind of live the no impact life for a period of time. And it seemed like a really good strategy for that film. It wouldn't be for your film. It wouldn't be for any other number of films. But that's where I think we have to be really, really creative. And then finally, the other thing that we do, which I think is tremendously important, is we do a lot of field building. We do residencies where we bring together filmmakers. And the convening function, I think being a really good filmmaker can be a pretty lonely life. And to bring people together, we bring them around stage of film, and we bring them around topics. So we've done around food, education. So we'll bring a number of filmmakers to one place that's really nice. And that's not just a throwaway idea. I mean, it's an idea that really came from going to a retreat where you can really have the time to talk to each other and eat well and have fun with each other and feed off of one another. And we constantly get the feedback that they just value this, and they build networks and they build relationships and associations that are very valuable. So that's kind of where we are now. It is a moving target. We're using Kickstarter, we never did before. We're using many tools that we didn't. We have an active Twitter feed. All that will change. If I were doing this in 6 months, it would probably be a different set of issues. Thank you.